personally, I find it slightly uncomfortable that we say to somebody who's coming, say, to work, to a German coming to work at King's, that yes, it's fine, you can bring your spouse and your kids to the UK, because we recognize that as well as being a worker contributing to this country, you
Yeah.
have a family life. But we're saying to a care worker who comes from Zimbabwe, say, no, you can come here, you can come and work in the sector, you can look after old people, but you cannot bring your spouse or your kids. I think that's both very obviously classist and indirectly quite racist.
Now, more than 700 migrants arrived in the UK after crossing the Channel in 11 boats yesterday. It's the highest number since Labour came to power. The boats were spotted suggesting an average of 64 people in each vessel. Let's talk to Jonathan Portas, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College University. Good afternoon, Jonathan.
Good afternoon.
Good to have you with us. This is the highest in recent weeks, but it does suggest that there is no let up so far in the flow of migrants across the UK. I mean, is it clear whether the new government does have a proper plan to deal with? They're talking about this new command force. They're talking about speeding up the processing of asylum applications. Do you think that could work?
Well, it's certainly likely to work better than the failed attempts by the previous government to deal with it, which made things worse. We had both the highly, incredibly expensive and frankly, very unlikely, always never going to work Rwanda plan. And then probably more seriously, we had the previous government's refusal to process asylum seekers, meaning that they remained in limbo, staying in hotels around the country at our expense, which of course was very bad for them personally, but also bad for the country, bad for taxpayers, and bad in all sorts of ways, which I think we need to go into now. So the government's determination to stop doing really damaging, stupid, cruel, and expensive things, I think, is an important, indeed an essential first step. But then, as you say, they will have to go beyond that and work out, how do you deal with this? What combination of faster processing, returns deals with countries where, in the minority of cases where people fail to get asylum and you can return them, you should return them, better working with the French, and hopefully opening up at least some safe and legal routes for some of the people, particularly those who have some sort of family connection to this country. That is the test, and whether that does indeed succeed in reducing the number of people who make these very dangerous crossings.
And there is a real indication, isn't there, that immigration once again is the most important issue to many voters. And some have pointed out that the government's response to the riots, where it has focused on bringing troublemakers before the courts, making sure that people are prosecuted, making sure that they are sentenced and that these cases are fast-tracked, does not address the root causes. And it's clear that some of the anger was in particular addressed at those hotels which are being used to house migrants. Now, the government has been very reluctant indeed to talk about these wider issues. Do you think it's right to do that?
Well, I think, first of all, we need to make a distinction between immigration and the small boat crossings, right? The vast majority of people who come here perfectly legally through the system, the new post-Brexit immigration system that we set up in 2021 to work and to study. And we know that indeed they are working and studying and making, of course, a contribution to our economy. That is the vast majority of immigration. And it's important, actually, the government goes out and says this, and says that on the whole, immigration, when managed and controlled as it is, of people who come here to work and study is hugely beneficial. And indeed, without it, we'd have to put up taxes or cut public services. So that's an important point to make. In terms of the specific issues with people who come here to claim asylum and are put in hotels, yes, and I think that was indeed a massive failing of the previous government that it put people in hotels, it parked them there, it refused to process them, and that cost us a lot of money, as well as exposing them, as we've seen, both to isolation and indeed in recent weeks to danger. Now, how you respond to that is indeed very difficult, but moving away from housing large numbers of people in hotels long term is clearly the right thing to do.
Um, Let me ask you then about that wider question of people who are coming here legally. We've got these new figures which suggest that migrants from Nigeria and India have filled more new jobs in the UK than Britain's in the 5 years or so since the COVID pandemic. The UK economy, there were 1.5 million new jobs in the past 5 years, nearly a third filled by Indian migrants. I mean, is this a concern, or is it just simply the fact that the types of vacancies that are emerging are ones for which we need to bring in people from places like India and Nigeria?
Well, I mean, people are coming here to work and study because there are jobs, and and our universities are very attractive, particularly to Indians. The reason that there are so many Indians coming is a combination of things. First of all, Indians come through all the main routes. They come to work in very high skilled jobs, the IT sector, as doctors and so on. They also come to work in jobs like social care, for example, where again you have quite a large number of Indians coming in to do jobs which are less well paid, but also very necessary. And then you have lots of Indians who come here to study and make a huge contribution to universities in general, and in particular to the institution I teach at King's. We have lots of Indians among other nationalities. All that is good. It doesn't, and the economic consequences of that are very positive. I don't think actually that when people ask in polls, all these things get mixed up, of course, immigration, asylum, small boats, and so on. I've seen very little suggest that people are concerned, if anything, opposite, about Indians coming here to work, to study, to work in the social care sector, and all the rest of it. On the whole, most of us welcome that, and quite right too.
But the government is trying to reduce those numbers, isn't it? And the new Labour government has said it's going to continue the change which was brought in under the previous government, which limits the numbers of family dependents that can be brought in particular by, for example, care workers. And that does seem to be having an effect in terms of bringing down the numbers of migrants coming to this country legally. Do you think that is a trend which is going to continue?
Well, immigration is certainly falling quite sharply at the moment. We've known this for some time, and it wasn't surprising. I mean, the very high numbers that we had that you referred to immediately after the pandemic were the result of a particular coincidence of a lot of special factors happening all at once. We're not going to go back to those numbers. It's going to come down quite sharply. I think the specific change with respect to the dependence of care workers, I think clearly has had some effect. I think it's too early to say what effect that will have on the ease of recruitment in the care sector, and whether it will have to be reversed in whole and in part because we still need people to work in that sector. I do think, personally, I find it slightly uncomfortable that we say to somebody who's coming, say, to work, to a German coming to work at King's, that yes, it's fine, you can bring your spouse and your kids to the UK, because we recognize that, as well as being a worker contributing to this country, you
Yeah.
have a family life. But we're saying to a care worker who comes from Zimbabwe, say, no, you can come here, you can come and work in the sector, you can look after old people, but you cannot bring your spouse or your kids. I think that's both very obviously classist and indirectly quite racist.
Professor Jonathan Portis, Professor of Economics and Public Policy at King's College University. Thank you very much indeed.